Today I'm talking with Alexis Monville. He talked about what he learned from the code reviews of his very first boss, co-founding a web company before the web had really taken off, and why he prefers to focus on impact. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello and hello everyone. With me I have Alexis Monville. Welcome, Alexis.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And here, and somehow, and like I just said before, I have some troubles with my mouse. I wanted to show here is for me in Belgium. This is where I am, and Alexis, you are in Bordeaux. So Google will take us to Bordeaux, which is not that far. It's about 1,000 kilometers of drive because I've driven it multiple times, and it's in the same time zone. So we're in the same time zone here together. And yep. Let's bring both of us back completely on screen. So, Alexis, for the people that don't know you, tell us a little more about yourself.
Yeah, with pleasure. I'm currently the chief of staff to the CTO at Red Hat. Red Hat is an enterprise software with an open source development model.
Yes, and well, that's what you're currently doing. And if I'm not mistaken, you've written a few books somewhere in the past as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked on 2 books. I'm really proud of that. That's part of my achievements. So they are there. Changing Your Team from the Inside, and I co-authored the book with Michael Doyle. Michael Doyle lives in Australia, so it's a bit far away from us. I'm a software engineer and I'm in charge.
So, but maybe indeed we can talk if you're talking about what you achieved as well.
Yeah, I'm usually tempted to speak about that. That's part of the big things that I'm proud of. So yeah, if you tempt me too much, I will speak about that. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And let's bring that first question here. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in
yeah, that's a very good question, and there's a lot of different possible answers. Usually, as I work in software and I work with a lot of people in software, people assume that I worked in software all my life, and that's not true. I was trained as a mechanical engineer. I was doing software development on the side to pay for my study. That was totally different. And then I worked in the automotive industry. And this is something that really influenced me because in software industry at the time, I worked for a company that was doing anti-lock brake systems. And we were using a lot of tooling to trace what we were doing and to learn from what we were doing. And we were one of the first company trying to do Six Sigma. So that was really influential for when I moved back to the software industry.
So it's interesting, but I wanted to go a little bit into the one part you said. You said you were writing software to pay for your studies. So tell us a little more about that. How did that came to happen?
It's just a connection through friends. At the beginning, I was just doing some training. I was a trainer for people who wanted to use the spreadsheets or word processing systems, and that's where I learned how to use a Macintosh. That was just the beginning of the Macintosh, and I was really excited about that machine. It was, of course, way too expensive for me to buy one, but that was cool to be able to use ones and to teach people how to use it. And at some point, I met someone who was doing more than that. He was really doing software development on Macintosh. And I was really excited about that because we were doing real custom software for companies and for small companies, and I jumped into that, and that was really fun because that experience was also influential in the way I learn and the way I teach people and the way I work with people. Uh, to tell you a little bit how we were working, William was working in weird hours, so he was usually working at night, uh, arriving really late at the office and leaving the office in the early hours of the day. And so usually I was meeting with him maybe once or twice a week, and usually after my work day at school. So I was going in the office that we had at the end of the day around 6 or 7 p.m. I was staying there until 11 or midnight and working on things. And usually I was meeting with him when I was just at the end. And sometimes I was not meeting with him for a few days. And we were working with a big notepad. And on the notepad, there was 2 columns. And on the first column, I was writing what I worked on. So I was writing, okay, I worked on that part, I worked on that screen, I worked on that function, I worked on that thing. So now I was explaining all the things I worked on. And on the right column, he was leaving me comments about the things I did. So basically, he was reviewing my code. So except at that time, there was no proper code review things. So he was looking at all the things I did, and he was leaving me comments saying, oh, on that screen, I noticed that it was not really well aligned on that thing. So be careful about that. Or you did an interesting job with that function. I moved it into our our shared library. So now we will be able to reuse that every time. I changed it a little bit to make it more generic, but that was really great work on that. On that thing, he was telling me, oh, you use that function, be careful of that because the query will be really slow when there will be a lot of record in the database. So you need to be careful about that. If there's no index, it will not work like this. And so really, really a lot of interesting reviews. And I was learning a lot with that person without even working with that person. That was, we were working together and not meeting with each other very often. But I had the feeling that we were having an ongoing conversation that were going for weeks. So it was really, really interesting. So I loved it.
Yeah, and it's also it shows a kind of working out loud in the sense that you said what you did, and that it was yeah, you got instant feedback on it.
Yeah.
Well, not instant. You got feedback on it on paper, and then you had to read it next time. But even if you didn't see him on a daily basis, he did review everything you said basically every day or everything you did. So
Yeah.
about every day you had feedback. So that's still was faster than many others had at that time, I would say. Even if it was not instant. So that's
Yeah,
very
imagine we are in the
instant.
80s. Oh, so that's something a little bit interesting when you see
Interesting,
people
and
working nowadays.
yeah, and it reminds a lot about working remote with people who are in different time zones in a sense, because you were working, although you were in the same time zones, you had different hours of work, and that's
Yeah,
interesting. So,
that when I worked with people in different time zone and I told them, oh, we can use shared documents and share what we were working on and leave each other feedback. That was a direct inspiration from what I did with that guy in the 80s. So that was influential also for that. That's a good point.
it's already an interesting tip for. We'll see if you have more of these in remote when we talk about remote working. Okay,
Speaking
let's
of
move to
pressure.
that next question. That if you had not been doing what you've been doing today, do you have any idea what you would been doing?
So the logical path would have been I started in the automotive industry. I was doing really well. Uh, if I had not switched to co-found a web company in the mid 90s, I would probably have stayed there. And and indeed, when I said I will quit to found the company, the boss of my boss called me and told me, seriously, what are you doing? I was about to tell you that you are on good track. He told me, okay, do you want to go to the US? We have a factory that is really struggling. They would love to have your help. Tell me, and you're up for the US in 3 months. You're there.
Wow.
So it was really interesting because you said, oh, yeah, that's quite challenging. I can take a bigger job, go in another country with all the support of my company, or I can go in the total unknown, doing something everybody is telling me that has no future, and that's really scary, but I really want to do it. So it was scary. So yeah, I could have go one way or the other. I picked one. That would have probably be the other path. That was a defining moment. Yeah.
Interesting. And so that I can. And how was it? Because I can imagine that. What did you feel when that boss of your boss came to you to say that? Because I can imagine that brings in lots of emotions.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I had already made up my mind,
Mhm.
and I was it's it I was glad that was probably good for my ego, and was really proud that someone would want to keep me, but my mind was already made on the other choice. So it's only years after that I realized how good that person was, how good he was when he hired me, because he I was looking for a specific job, and I was really fixated on that. I wanted to work in R&D, uh, and um, and nobody wanted to hire me in R&D. That was really interesting in the automotive industry. And that guy told me, yeah, of course, I will hire you in R&D. But nowadays, I don't have a position in R&D. Uh, so I have a position in production, in really manufacturing on the floor plan to manage the shop floor. And but it's just for the transition. We're just starting a new informatics system, so we need you for that, because you have knowledge in computers and so on. So that will really help us. But it's just for 6 months, and then you switch to an R&D position. And of course, after 3 months, I was in love with that job on the shop floor, working with all the workers, working with all the things. It was always something was going that was so fun, so much fun. And I was looking at my friends that were new hires in R&D, and I was looking at them thinking that job is so boring and so slow, and and so I knew that at some point I would need to come back to my
Mhm.
to tell him, maybe maybe I don't want to go. And yeah, after 3 months, I think he came to see me and said, "Oh, I did not forget about that R&D position." And I nowadays I know that was just to test me a little bit,
Mhm.
and it took me some time to tell him, no, I'm not really interested. I would
Mm.
definitely prefer to stay uh, in that part of the organization, in manufacturing. That's where I really love being. And that I believe I have an impact. I believe I'm doing well. What do you think? Can I stay there and find out a way to? And he said, yeah, I was wondering when you will tell me. So yeah, he was a
Because he knew.
character.
So that's really nice. On the other hand, it's kind of strange that if the moment that you're leaving, that they give you another option to a bigger opportunity. It feels like both. Oh, they see me, and at the same time, it's like, why didn't they tell me before? I can imagine that it brings other emotions as well.
Yeah, there was probably a plan that I was not aware of, and that's
Hmm.
probably something to remember, that if you are building plans for people you are working with, or career development plans with them or for them, you probably share that a little bit. Because if
It's usually better.
maybe it would have been different. I would have probably had more trouble to make my mind about the opportunity.
Yeah, and then and it will help in other things. So I think that's a good lesson learned from that as well.
Yeah.
That's an interesting part. But you moved on, and you were happy with whatever you did later on, I would say.
Yeah, that was fun.
Let's move to that next question. What is for you your biggest challenge, and why is it a good thing for you?
It's an interesting question. You can read it in a lot of different ways. I had a lot of different challenges that came to me. Usually, what happened was it's something you don't know how to do it, and you need to find a way. And it happened when we co-founded that web startup I was telling you about. We were three people in 1995. We were 850 in 2000 when I left. And we were in 10 countries listed on the public market. That was really a crazy adventure. And there's a lot of things you don't know how to do. And that was really the beginning of the web. So even the technology was not there. We were inventing some technology to make our things. So that was really totally new things to do. And I think that's those kind of things when you don't really know how to do it from a technical standpoint or from an organizational standpoint. You don't really know how to organize things. You don't have necessarily a lot of experience, but you need to find a way, and you need to work with other people to find a way. And together you find a way. And I think that's that cooperation, sharing the same goal and being able to collaborate toward the same goal, that was really something exciting to me. And that was the opportunity to use things that you know in another context. So that was quite fun. So I think that was a big challenge. And after that, I tried to build on that idea of, we basically can do a lot of different things. I'm not saying everything, but a lot of different things. But it's usually way easier when you are working with others. If you are trying to do it by yourself, it's difficult.
And if you look at your world around you now, at what you're doing, is there anything that you're still trying to figure out with other people at this moment?
Yeah, I believe the beliefs of people about themselves, their ability to grow and to develop themselves, it's still a challenge for me because we know, researchers know that adults can develop themselves all along their life. We know that, we can observe that, but we also know that some people stop developing themselves. It's more difficult to know necessarily why it happens, and it's also more difficult to understand how to help them continue to develop themselves. You cannot tell people develop yourself, or you can tell them.
Well, you can tell them, but it doesn't always help. Yes.
Yeah, it will probably not help and probably not work. So, what are the good questions to ask? What are the good experience to give them? And that's an interesting challenge. And that's when you look at other people around you. And that's a similar challenge for yourself. So, what are the good things I need to learn? What are the good things I need to learn to reach my next goal? Yeah, for example, I want to be a board advisor or a board member in the future. I want to work with probably startup or scale-ups because that's the part of the growth of a company that I find really exciting because there's a lot of things around organization and leadership development. Great. What do I need to learn to be able to be considered as a good board member or board director? I don't know. Yes, now I know because I worked on it. But that's the kind of things that you need to figure out for yourself. What are the skills that you need to be considered for your next role or even your long-term goal? That's the things I want to do in 10 years. So what do I need to learn? What kind of experience do I need to have during those 10 years to be a good candidate or to be really a good board advisor or a good board director. And that works, of course, for any roles that you want to have, to any long-term or short-term horizon, I would say.
That's really interesting because, like you say, this is a question I have myself, and I know a few others that basically told me the same thing. Eve, like, I like to help smaller companies. I like to help scale up startups, whatever we call them. And yeah, how do I get in? And for me, the answer is in the question that you were asking. Okay, what are the skills you need? What are the skills that these people are looking for? Could we acquire these skills? Could we know how could we help them? Because it's not because you've had a company and that you grew it to a very large scale that makes you a perfect boardman. No, there are other things that you need to bring to the table, yeah, to help them on their things. Because if you bring the exact same things that typical starters have, then you don't bring any value. So you need to look at the skills that they're looking more. So that's it's really interesting. And yeah, I'm not always interested in looking in having 10-year plans, because usually these plans don't work out. But in the way you described it, I really like it, because it's really like, okay, what are the extra skills I can learn? And it might bring me in that direction. It might bring me in a little bit different direction. But learning an extra skill is always interesting. It helps us grow in different kind of ways that we don't always see. It might help make us better in our current role, and we might stay, or it might just make us outgrow our current role and move to the direction we want or another direction. So it's a very interesting way of looking at things. Now, Alexis, I know you for quite a while, and I know that both you and Isabel are really driven people. So you have a lot of passion. Do you know where that is coming from?
It's difficult. I believe I always had that sense of wanting to have an impact. And if I said big words, it's yeah, I always wanted to change the world. I always wanted to have an impact and to leave the place in a better place than it was before. And
The typical Boy Scout rule: let's leave the world a better place after I've left,
yeah,
after I've gone, something like that. Wow. Yeah.
and it's difficult to know where to focus your energy and where you can have an impact. And there's a lot of things that are based on who you meet with, what are the opportunities, and there are things, of course, that you decide to work on that and to have an impact there. There are things it's more based on the opportunities that are there when you right time, right moment, right thing. That's I don't know, but it's the thing is, when you think about having an impact and doing big things, you realize that it's nearly impossible to do it by yourself and to have all the skills that would be needed to already have an impact. And that's where you need to try to understand people a little bit better and find a way to put in place really a cooperation. And I think cooperation is really collaboration toward the same goal. And trying to find that and trying to work with other people to achieve something bigger, it's really what energizes me. There's nothing better than working with a team of people at whatever level in whatever industry, I would say, and feeling that energy in the room because they are doing things better than if they were trying to do things by themselves. They are building on each other's ideas and they are going really fast, and you feel the energy in the room. And being able to facilitate that, it's rewarding in itself. At the end of one workshop, for example, a guy put me on paper a small note at the end, and he gave it to me. And he said, "I love the energy that you have. It's the kind of energy that gets things done." And it was the biggest gift I have. That was better than a bonus. I think my boss listened, I still want the bonus, but it's really cool. I loved it. But that's the kind of thing that really really rewards in itself. About you feel that you have an impact and you help other people to have an impact.
Yeah, I understand that definitely as a facilitator. Then and sometimes it only takes a few things that we need to do, but then you see the energy growing in a room, and then it's yeah. Then we just need to step back and let it happen, because that's sometimes is dangerous as a facilitator to keep wanting to join them because they have so much energy, but. I've done that in the past where I kill the energy just by stepping in. So I've already learned, okay, when the energy is there, then okay, I just need to watch it and make sure that it's canalized in the correct directions. But I don't need to step in and be part of the energy as a facilitator. And you can do that in a lot of different roles. And I think that's what I've seen you do in multiple roles over the years. Like you say, you're now at Red Hat, so you're in a different kind of position than a lot of the other things than you did in the past, but it still is facilitating a group of people collaborating together in a sense. Is that correct way of stating?
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens all the time. It can be ephemeral. It can be just for a meeting or for a series of meetings because we have a specific challenge to tackle, or it can be with your team, the team of the people you're working with on a day-to-day basis. It happens all the time in different contexts, and it's always that thing of I will say again something that is obvious, but the sum of the parts is bigger than and what we can accomplish together is really bigger than what we can accomplish, the sum of what we can accomplish individually. So it's that thing I want to reach. That 1 + 1 = 3 or 10.
Yeah, I recognize that it's my mathematical part of my brain doesn't understand it, but my facilitation part of my brain definitely understands it. And indeed, like you say, you know it's bigger than two. You just don't know if it's 3 or 5 or 10 or yeah. So you just see that it's a lot bigger than what these people could do on their own. And being part of that I can see that is a big drive. So some of these things. So that kind of brings us to automatically to that next question. What do you consider your biggest achievement?
It's a very difficult one because I tend to always look in the future and not a lot in the past, because you shared the question before. I had prepared my books to say those ones were big achievements because it was a long process. It was a frustrating process, and it was really an interesting process about the things you learn on how to write, how to gather your ideas, how to create a structure that works, how you fail, how you get helps from others to have reviews and to improve what you have. And when we worked on the second book, we had, of course, we were two working on it, so it was from the start really different than being alone. But
Is that also because you learned from the first book that because you talked about before that you like to do everything with more people, and so the first book you wrote on your own, so it kind of like, okay, if I do another one, I definitely need to use more other brains. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. And that was and what we did was we worked together, but we also involved the other people to help us review the sample chapter. So we had a structure in mind, and we wanted to test the structure. So we wrote the first version of the sample chapter with the structure to test the structure with a lot of reviewers. We used the feedback to improve our structure, and then we started with our structure. We had reviewers that reviewed the different chapters, all the things we wanted to cover, and we had reviewers that reviewed the whole thing, and we worked with an editor also to help us on things. So the second book, we had a more collaborative and more structured way of involving people. For the first one, I involved people too late in the process, so it was a too big thing to review. And it's difficult to provide review to someone who sends you 200 pages. But where do you start? So the simple way is this: it's great. Didn't read it, but it's great.
Yeah, it reminds me of a joke that I know about. If you do code review, if you send a two-line code to someone to do a code review, you get 20 remarks, and then if you send 20 pages of code, then we'll give you 2 lines of code to remarks that say, okay, you need to change this and that, and it's not that useful. It's at a different level. I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting because I like to write as well collaboratively. So I usually write a lot in Google Docs and share it with lots of people. And indeed, if the people that you involve in the beginning, they will jump in the beginning and give lots of feedback. And then when you share it later, with when there is already like 100 or 200 pages written, then it's indeed a different kind of feedback. I didn't even think about that earlier on. So thank you. That's a very good idea to think more about. When do you involve who in writing processes? So
and it forces you to think about what are really the skills of the people you will involve, what they like to do, and so you want to think a little bit about it between the people who have big vision, or we can deal with big ideas and complex system, and people who love the details and going from A to B to C, and so you need to involve those people when they will be comfortable, because they will really be good at doing their thing on your thing. So it will really be helpful. But it means you are really mindful of what you are doing. So it means you know what you are doing a bit.
Well, for me, that I find that the hard part. I fully agree with what you say, but what I've noticed when I write, I'm write much more in a free flow. Okay, this is a thing, and then everything grows. I don't have a big idea up front about what the whole structure is going to be, and that's exactly why I need to involve some of these people earlier on. So that's a very good idea for when I start to do something next. It's interesting. So thank you, because that's indeed, and it's all you learn from that achievement that you have of these two books. So it's a nice thing.
There's a lot of different things. There's a lot of things that you believe you know very well, and that as soon as you start to try to explain to other people, you realize that you don't know that very well. You need to learn a little bit more about it, so you are really able to share it confidently. And there was even things that I was doing, and when I started to share it, I was not so sure. So I experimented with other teams to test ideas, to say, okay, is it really working if I do that this way? What will happen if I'm doing this instead of this? So that was interesting, that you realize that, I always do it this way. What if I do that differently? What would happen? Is it really different? And yes, it is. It was for the thing I had in mind. But it's fun.
It's interesting that you say that, because indeed there are some agile books that say this is probably what you need to do, and then you feel that these people didn't, or I felt at that time that the people didn't really understand it and grasp it, and somehow a lot of agilists run with it and say, oh, that author wrote this, so this is true. And then, but even if you read the very first original text, it's like, I think it's something like that, I'm not sure, I didn't test it. And then 10 books later, it's everybody saying this person said and this person tested X and Y. Like, no, maybe not. And I prefer what you say, okay, that you write it. While you write it, you realize maybe that's not 100% true. And instead of just saying, this is probably true, you actually try it out with other teams, and then you're better in what you write out. I have a different challenge when I'm writing, is that I noticed that after 20 years of being in the agile space, that I have lots of stories and a lot of things that I tried out, but I didn't write down much of these, and I've been talking about it left and right, but I forgot to write down some of these things. And so I have experimented with a lot of these things, but never took the time to write everything down. And so now it's like, oh, wait a minute, there is still, I've noticed this just last week, that somebody asked me a question and I said, okay, but this is how I did it there, and this is how I did it, and that other company, the person was like, oh, okay, you do have this experience. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't think about it. So, because we sometimes, well, I noticed it's probably for getting older. I keep forgetting what are all the things I know, and I still believe that half of what I know is wrong, because I just didn't experience it in other kind of companies. But still, I have experience in let's say, I've tried multiple things in like 4 or 5 companies, and tried and experimented. Is it always working? And have some of these things. So
Yeah,
we
I love
shouldn't
what you
forget
said about.
yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I love what you said about half of what you believe is probably wrong. It's always an interesting question to ask ourselves. How do I know I'm right? And it's when you start with that question, you say, okay, I don't have a lot of really strong foundation on that thing. So it's based on, well, okay, maybe we need to check that a little bit more carefully. That's, yeah, I believe that. Yeah, okay. I trust you, but
Well,
I would like a little bit more.
yeah, I think there's a lot that we somehow take for granted, and I know that in your country, Laurent Bossavit wrote a very great book about really diving deep in some of the agile practices and ideas about Conway's law, or a few other things. As I say, okay, let's what is it really? No, the cone. I meant the cone of uncertainty. So how is that really true? And it turns out not to be true, because like you say, half of what I said earlier on, half of what we think we know is wrong, and it's really good to question ourselves, but it's all not always easy, because if someone else questions ourselves, then it's always like, yeah, it's getting in your face. It's like, this is, how are you sure? And yeah, then it's very tempting to dive deeper and put our foot in the mud and say, no, 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 I know it's true. Where, like you say, it's not always the case, and so it's much better to think for ourselves how true is true. Um,
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
yeah, that's that is part of the hard part. I think what we have in our industry, that we still are. This is a very young industry. Yeah, we're creating software like since the Second World War or something like that. That's less than 100 years, and the whole agile thing is only 20 years old. That's nothing if you compare it to other kind of industries and engineering and everything. So yeah, by design, most of what we think we know is wrong, and still we do things a lot better than 10, 20 years ago. But
Oh,
we're
yeah.
still learning. Okay, I want to move to that next question. Um, yeah, so do you have a personal agility tip to share? Is there anything that you say, oh, this is something I do that I want to share?
And I think it's connected with the the thing we will discuss later. But the thing I like doing is thinking of my goals in terms of impact and in terms of behavioral change. Behavioral change for me, when it's about me changing my behavior, growing anyway, or behavioral change for other people that are involved in getting me to achieve my goal. And reflecting on my goals in that way really helps me. And so that's something that is useful. Why it's an agile tip? Because I believe um, if you're doing that for yourself or if you're doing that for your team, you can reflect way better on, okay, what is the objective of this week or those 2 weeks if you have iterations or sprints, and think in terms of, okay, what kind of impact do we want to have? I don't like to think in features or to think in things we need to do, because as soon as you start to think in behavioral change, usually you understand how it matters and how you can measure it. And if you understand that, then you can really measure that you have the impact or not.
Mm.
And usually you make a lot of assumption about, oh yeah, we will do that, and then all the users will do that. And you say, yeah, let's do that. And you do that thing and nothing happens. So what are we doing now? So if you are just on that thing of ticking the boxes of all the things that someone wants you to do, you will never measure the impact. And so maybe in five sprints from now, you're broke and you don't have enough money left. But if you are measuring the impact, maybe that thing, you'll realize at the end of the sprint, nothing happened. It doesn't work. So what will really move the needle?
And is that you were talking before that you created your startup working in the web while nobody was doing it, so really in the early ages. Is that something that you learned at that time? Because I can imagine if you start a small company with 3 people where you're the front runners, nobody else is creating web pages. Basically, if you're doing the wrong thing, you will not have clients and you will run out of money. So that's something you learned also about impact at that time?
It's we were lucky to have enough runway to be able to do a lot of experiments. So it was in a way easier for us, and people were trying to do a lot of labor-intensive things and hiring more people to do labor-intensive things. When we were looking at what kind of technology do we need to build to make those things, to automate all those things. So I remember the people coming with big paper catalogs. There was paper catalogs in the past for younger listeners.
Paper catalog is a book where you can find everything that you wanted to buy at the store.
Imagine a catalog with Amazon inside. So basically, people were coming with all their catalogs with stuff that could be hotels, that could be furniture, whatever, and they wanted to have that on the web. And they give you that, and they said, "Okay, turn that into web pages." Is it the right thing to do? No, but we were thinking, what can we do? So instead of doing that, for some of them, we built their internal information system that will help them build their paper catalog, because it was still useful at the time. Nobody was connected to the web, basically. And also build their web catalog. And while they were having a way to order on paper at the end of the catalog, we were, of course, converting that into the ability to order directly on the web. So that's that kind of thing. Then when you do it the basic way, you are doing just, I will pay a lot of people to create all those pages that are in the catalog, to create them on the web. When you think in a different way, you are thinking, okay, I will build the information system that will help those people build their catalog next time, but that will also build the web and that will connect with their ordering system. And that's what we are on. And we build the technology for that, and we help people do that. So that was, of course, easier for us to build those things. And we were doing, in the night, we were building a full catalog, and people were looking at that saying, wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. That was fun.
Yeah, but it brings me to indeed these first moments. There were a lot of companies indeed that will send you a catalog, and you could buy, like you say, furniture. But there's still, even in Belgium today, there's companies who still mail you a catalog with office supplies and stuff like that. And it's interesting if you look at how, for most of these catalog companies, their website is just horrible, and it's not reflecting the way I would order things on Amazon. And you could see that there still is in that basically the best way to order for these companies is have their catalog, and then you see, okay, I want to buy I don't know, I want to buy 10 pens. Okay, I can see the number of the pen. I go to their website, I click in, I put in the number, and I put in, okay, I want 10 copies of that, and then it's added. So the rest of their website is just totally not working. You really need to know the order number for that pen that you get from the catalog, and they never moved from one way to another. And what I hear you describing is, okay, we create a tool that will help you create that catalog, but at the same time find a way how we can visualize that same information on the web. And what I see is that, yeah, and then of course you need to make ways to find it and whatever. But what I see in a lot of these companies, I'm thinking about one that I try to avoid using, but from time to time I still need it. And basically they have like 4 or 5 pages with items that are interesting to buy and that there still is a lot of sales for, and these are the ones I buy there, because everything else on their web I don't find for whatever reason. And I don't use their catalog because I don't want to keep their catalogs around. It's just, yeah, it's not interesting. So it's really interesting how you bring that up and how you indeed say, okay, we want to look at the goal, we want to look at the impact that we can have and help these people and do, because indeed they were talking about, we want to have, like you say, we want to have the website. But what is really important in your story, and I hope people picked it up, is that at that moment their catalog was still their most important tool, and they still needed ways. So if you could help them create in an easier way their catalog, they will be really helpful. Yeah, that will be really helping their biggest problem, and solving the side thing about the website also. But that's not the thing that is bringing in their money at that moment, and they might not realize it. So, but good, that's that part is definitely there. Okay, I want to move to that next question. If what have you learned about remote work? And you already talked a little bit about some of the tools that are useful for remote working, but maybe there's other things that you learned about remote work. Because nowadays with Red Hat, I assume most of the time you are remote working, right? Is this correct?
It's it changed things for Red Hat, of course. But before the pandemic, already 40% of people in engineering, in software engineering, were already working remotely. And the other people in the company were going to an office, but not necessarily every day. So there's always some functions that were more working in an office, or there are always people who prefer to work in an office and don't want to work at home. But everybody had that possibility to work from the office or from home. So, of course, what the pandemic changed is that suddenly everybody was remote. And so some people suffered about that because it's really completely different to work remotely like me. Okay, I'm working remotely, but I have an office. So I have a space dedicated for work. I can leave work and go in the house. Okay, it's only a few steps away. So the commute is not too long. But it's completely different how you can close the door and I'm comfortable working in my office. So totally different than some colleagues I had that suddenly were stuck at home with only the ability to work either in their bedrooms or their wife was working in the bedroom while they were working in the living room, watching for kids at the same time. So that was absolutely unsustainable. That was not working for me. So some people learned how to create a space for them, so they were able to work at home. Some people moved, some people realized that remote working was not for them and they want to go to the office. So there's a few things that we learned from that. The thing that was really interesting is when you were remote before, and the majority of people in your team or in the group you were working with at the time, either a long-standing team or an ephemeral working group, where the majority of the people who were in an office, they were all gathering in an office, and remote people had trouble to have their voice heard. But nowadays, it changed because people
More the
are
opposite.
always thinking about the hybrid thing, and they are looking at how making sure that everybody is heard, because they all had that experience at some moment. They were all at some point someone who is remote. So for some of them, they solved the problem by going into the office. For others, they are now more mindful that we need to make things work for everybody. There's a lot of time when the best solution is, okay, we are all remote. because it's easier to use a tool on our laptop, and it does not make a lot of sense to be in the same room with being all of us on the laptop. And sometimes it's better to be all of us in a room, because high bandwidth communication for a long period of time, from breakfast to dinner and to after dinner, is better to solve different issues, and you need that social time together. But I think we learn more of all those things that are important, and I believe that maybe the things we will not spend in offices, we will maybe spend that in travel and expenses for gathering or offsites, and I believe it will offsites will grow a lot, because people will want to do more offsites, not necessarily gathering in an office. Maybe they will not even have an office at all.
So what I'm hearing is that, okay, you need to think much more deliberate about when you will be together, and then instead of just saying every day we'll be together, let's work a lot from home, and then from time to time let's really go offsite and bring everybody to the same location, but for multiple days. And then it's not just the work time, but it's also breakfast, it's also in the evening social activities and things like that. So that's what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
That's an interesting thing. And how do you see that? And I agree. I think this is what a lot of I would say companies were doing even before COVID hit. Is that the full remote companies were already in that thinking in that direction. I think a lot, but then it brings also the other challenge. How do you deal with the diversity in your team, with people with small children? Because both of us, our children are almost adults. So my youngest one is 15, the oldest one is 20. So that they're able to deal on their own. We can basically leave and go for a full week somewhere else, me and my partner, and then have the children. They can live on their own for a week. That's no problem. But that's not possible if you have younger children. So how do you see that working with companies? Have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, you can see that that requires a lot of logistics and a lot of planning in advance. Because if you tell people, okay, we will have a week of offsite next week, you're probably damaging their life. You're putting them into big troubles, because they will need to find a way to make it happen, and maybe it's not just possible. If you say, okay, we will have 4 offsites next year, and we schedule to have them at this week, this week, this week, and this week, some people can provide feedback way ahead of time, saying, okay, that week would work, or that week does not work in my country, it's school holidays or whatever.
Exam scheduled for the children, I want to be at home, things
and
like
so,
that. Yeah.
you can adjust your plan, but you are planning for 6 months in advance or a year in advance, and you're providing a lot of visibility. Usually, even with people with young children, will be able to adjust to that, because they have some time to plan in advance, and they know how many of offsites there will be. They know what they will do, and that will be okay. And their partner will support them at that moment, or maybe their family, or you don't know how they will organize themselves, but they will be able to find a way. But that means you need to plan in advance those things. That's not something on the top of your head. You can do a gathering next week. Yeah, you will have all the people over 45 can probably do it. The younger people can probably do it, and you lose all the people in between that have younger kids. Too bad. That's probably the majority of them in the office.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, but I like your solution, because indeed and yes, of course, it brings some things that you need to schedule and you need to think. It has some disadvantages, but at the same time, like you say, the opposite part is that because of that, people don't need to go to the office that much, and so basically we can work much more from home. And so if we then have 4 weeks out of a year that we're not at home, that kind of is a good mix that can work for most people. Again, like you said earlier on, some people prefer to go to the office, but for a lot of people, yeah, for me that would definitely work. Even if I was younger with my children, that would definitely have worked. So that is something to think about and to schedule. Um, I like that, and that's what I saw and read already before the pandemic. A lot more companies thinking, why do we need an office? Can't we figure it out in another way? And for the people that still want to go to the office, okay, there's lots of co-working spaces where you can figure out. One of the interviews I did was with someone who actually preferred to go to a co-working space now with people who have totally nothing anything to do with what he was doing, but that enlightened his brain as well. So he could just have as an extrovert, he could have a chat with some of the people and then go back to his coding things because that's totally independent from the conversation he had, and he can just focus again. So that would work really well for him. So
And
that's
you can see that the people that are managing offices and or co-working spaces are now way more flexible. They invented day passes, so instead of needing to book a spot for a month, you can buy 10 days and you come whenever you want. But, you need to book in advance, but just a day in advance, not for 2 months. And so it's way more flexible, and you can have a simple space. You can book a meeting room. They are way more flexible because of what we learn in that period of time.
Yeah, I'd see the same thing. It's well, I think co-working spaces. I think I know them for about 10 years. Probably they existed before, but then it's about 10 years that I know. But the way they organize themselves have completely shifted. Like you say, it's a totally different kind of yeah. I don't know. I was about to say beast, but it's not a beast. But it's a totally kind of different kind of way of organizing things. So
Yeah.
thanks for adding that part because that's interesting as well. Okay, let's move to that next question. What is a book that you have read that you want to talk about?
So that was a really difficult question, and thank you
Yeah,
for
because I
sharing
know
that
you like to
question.
read a lot of things,
Because I'm an avid reader, so it's difficult. So the book is Impact Mapping, and
and that's the one. And on the screen you also see a little bit of part of the things that we already talked a little bit about with goal, like the impact and things
yeah,
like that.
so Impact Mapping
Um,
from Go to Agic, and that's also the guy I believe you should invite. But yeah, that's your next question, I guess.
it's
So
one of the next questions indeed.
yeah, impact mapping. Why? Because that's exactly connected with what I've said before. It's really you think about your goal, you think about all the people that are involved, all the people that can help you or can prevent you from achieving your goal, and forcing you to look at that. It's really looking at all your stakeholders, and then you look at what kind of behavior they should adopt, all those actors, so you can achieve your goal. And it is really an interesting exercise because sometimes you say, I don't know. I don't really know those people. And that's an interesting signal. Maybe there's more research to be done. Maybe you need to work with those people a little bit more to really understand what they want, what they need, and what they will do. So that can help you. Why I liked really that, because it's something you can use, of course, when you build a product or when you build a service, of course, but it's also something really useful if you think of your company, your organization, or your team as a product. And in a way, your company, your organization, your team is a product. And the customer of that product, the user of that product, are the employees. So we always think of the customer experience, but I believe the employee experience is really important. So if you build your team, your organization, your company as a product that will provide your employees an incredible experience, then they will do a fantastic work to serve your customers and so on and so on. So I love impact mapping also because of that. You can use it in a lot of different contexts, and of course you can use it for yourself, which is interesting.
I like what you say and what you also mentioned about we don't know these people or we know. yeah, it's one of the tools that I really like to use a lot. I've been in situations where people were already writing code, and they were asking me to do some kind of user story mapping and kind of looking at the big blocks. And I said, well, before I want to do that, is let's start with a small part of doing impact mapping, because they were already doing writing code. I was assuming this will be done in like 15 minutes because they have everything they have, and it will help me knowing the actors. I wasn't 100% sure if it would go that fast, but if it was true what they were saying, I would say they could probably figure it out very quickly. Um, but that workshop took 2 hours, and they still didn't. They still hadn't agreed on the major goal. There were two different, and I'm thinking about one specific part where I did it, where basically the two biggest managers in the room. One was thinking, well, the impact is really saving a lot of money for our company, and the other was, well, we with this we will actually make a lot of money, which are both things about, because one of the things that Coco says, you need to talk about the goal until you find money. So it's really interesting to think about that. So these were two things about money, but kind of opposite. And it's like, what is it really? Is it this or is it that? And basically they had to leave that meeting, and they had to have that discussion with their boss, which is the CEO of the company, to say, wait a minute, this big project that we're doing, why are we doing it? Is it actually because we want to save money and make things cheaper in a cheaper way, or is it really something that will bring in a lot of revenue? um, but that was at the moment that developers were already writing code, so that was very crazy. But of course, this project would never have been a success if they had not had that discussion, even while writing the code, because it turned out to be something else altogether. So it was, yeah, it was very interesting. And that's an experience. This is, of course, the most extreme version that I had, but I had similar kind of experiences when people think that they know what they want to do, and when you actually do a full impact mapping, that it turns out that it's really hard to do that.
And it's crazy to think that when you start to enter that thing of, oh, we will build something, there's a lot of people that are excited about all the things they need to do. And they can list a lot of things, activities, features, and things that they want to build. And then they have a big problem because they have a big list of things and they don't know how to prioritize. And of course, it's annoying to ask, okay, why do we want to do that? And for who do we want to do that? And what do we want to achieve with that? So it's very, very annoying to do that for each of the items. But if you are doing the impact mapping, then maybe you can bucket some of the item and say, okay, let's focus on that impact first. And what are those things that you have listed that are connected with that impact? And that's way easier to prioritize in that way. So it's helping a lot.
Yeah, I think even just having this conversation helped me already. I have a conversation with a couple of friends working on a book that I've written actually a lot of that about, and next week we have a workshop about it on, okay, how we're going to reschedule things and move things around. And just having this conversation with you, Alex, made me realize actually I should do the impact mapping for that book and the workshop that we're creating with it, because that's something we've done in the past. And the impact mapping is inside the book, it's inside the workshop. But I've used another example, and I should have used the example of the book itself, because that's and I was already thinking, what will we do as a way to start off our conversations next week? So that's, well, I will of course have to agree with them, or they have to agree with me, but I think that's a good way to do that, to really have an impact mapping on
excellent. I love it.
On what we're going to do. So I'll keep you in touch when we have more there out of that. So that's that already. This has changed me as well. It's interesting because I keep doing this for my clients, and we don't always think enough about it. And like you say, you can do it for yourself, you can do it for your company. And while you were saying company, I was thinking, oh, wait a minute, that sort of click in my head. So thank you for sharing it.
Excellent. Great.
And I wanted to openly share that, because I think this is what happens a lot with our customers. We have everything in our mind, we think something, and then we don't always think about some of these tools that are there. and that we sometimes know, well, a lot of my clients know these tools, but they don't always realize, oh, I can actually use it for this as well, just like the example I shared now. So thanks for sharing that.
Pleasure.
And for the people that don't know the book, it's actually a very, very thin book. It's I don't know how many pages it is, but it's less than, yeah, exactly. It's a very thin book with lots of comics in it. It's very yeah, the way Goiko writes and with his comics and with his drawings, it's yeah, you can
It's
read
really
it probably,
easy to
yeah.
start.
And again,
It's really easy to start and to get into that mindset, and then you
yeah,
want to find better questions and so on. So that's a cool thing, cool way to start.
exactly, and you can read it in an hour, and then you can use it in a lifetime. I would say
Yeah.
it's a lot to that is there. And that's why I want to say, people sometimes think, oh, but it's just a small book, so it's not. No, actually, this is a book where it's interesting from start to finish. Alistair Cockburn used to say that most of the books you can throw out is the second part because it's not interesting. You only need to read the first 30 or 50% of a book, and this is one of these books where I think you can. This is so small that you can read everything, so it's interesting.
Great.
Okay, I want to move to that next question. What's the question that I didn't ask you that you think I should also ask you?
That's a good question. I didn't thought of that one. I don't know. I think we covered a lot of ground. There's probably one thing about that's something I'm working on with people I'm working with or with mentees, and of course I'm working on myself this way, is trying to really develop leadership skills. And so if I formulate that into questions, I would say, what are the important things to look at when you want to develop your leadership skills? And usually the way I answer the question is in using a model that I have in my head. And it's just imagine you have 4 different axes. And there's one axis for the business, one axis for execution, and there's one axis for people and one axis for system. And you need to think about all the things you are doing on those different axes. And usually people are working on execution because they need to deliver something. But how they are working there and how their work on execution is connected with the other axes, how it's connected with the business, how much they know the business in their industry, their business, the competitors, the partners, how much they know about that, how they know that their company is making money. How do they know that? I've worked with people that don't even know how their company is making money. It's interesting. So
I know a lot of freelancers that are really happy about what they're doing, but they totally don't understand accountancy, and they don't like to read contracts and stuff like that, and so they're yeah. So well, for me, it's you need to work on your business as well to make sure that you understand your business, that you know, well, they might know how much money they have on the bank account, but they don't know how much taxes they need to pay or VAT or whatever. So they really have no clue how much money they have. And that's just one of the few different things to do. And I really agree. Execution, it's the easiest one to work on because that's, yeah, if you don't work on that, you don't deliver, and then basically people won't like you. But there is so much more.
and of course, if you are only on business, that doesn't work either because you are very knowledgeable about the industry and the business, but you don't know how to deliver. So that doesn't work. So those two are of course connected. If you look at that, the system axe will tell you, okay, how do I improve my system? I spoke about automation before. Yes, of course, there's a lot of things you should automate because it doesn't make sense to do the same thing again and again and again. I'm not saying you are building automation each time you are doing one thing. Doesn't make sense either. You need to balance the investment, but there's a lot of things that you need to think about to improve the system, the organization, the processes, and all those things. And it's really important because it's part of the experience. The people that are working with you, the people in the company, your customers, your partners will have. That's part of their experience. And of course, the people aspect is critical because, I hear a lot of time people that are telling me that they are hiring really great people. Okay, cool. And I'm always tempted to ask them, how do you know they are great? And what are the criteria you use? Do you think about their job for today or the job they will do in 5 years in your company? What are your criteria? I'm interested. You're saying you are hiring great people, but tell me how do you know they are great, and what are the criteria you use? And that will probably help you to retain people. There's a lot of discussion in industries about the cost of attrition or the cost of non-retention. People leaving for other company and high turnover in some industries or some companies. But what are we doing about that? And if you don't discuss with people about their career, what they are doing now, but what they can achieve in the future and how they will get there, you cannot keep them, because the next time they will have a call from someone presenting an opportunity, they will go away. Working on those 4 axes, and it works if you are a manager, of course, makes a lot of sense to be balanced on those 4 axes. But it also works for individual contributors, because it's also really interesting to work with your coworkers, the other team members, or with your manager about helping your peers in the team, or working on yourself with your managers or your peers about your performance goals or your development goals and your career goals and your career questions, and using the experience of the other people that are there to learn about them and learn more about you and learn more about what you can do next.
That's really interesting because it's really important that we need to have to work on these kind of things. That I like the multiple axes that you think about. I was while you were talking, I was thinking about a book, and I can't come up with the name. It could be The Founder's Dilemma, but I'm not sure. But it's a book that talks about working in your company or working on your company, and there's a lot there. They're like, okay, and like these freelancers I was talking about, they're working in their company trying to do something, but they're not working on their company. How can we look further ahead? And automating is part of it, and that's the IT solution. Oh, we'll just automate everything, and that is part of it, but there is need a lot more when we work with people. I really like that you say, is it for their current job or for the future job? Especially if we're looking into IT, well, I don't really care how good a language they know. What's much more important, how good are they at learning a new language? Because if they have done 20 years of the same language, they have 20 years experience, but they only know one language, but they will always stick in that language. And if your company doesn't want to involve and will always keep in that language, development language, that might be fine for now, but we don't know about in 20 years. And if you want, as a business owner, you really want to think further. And for me, any manager should think as a business owner at some level.
Exactly.
We shouldn't think at everything, because we can of course not have everybody involved in everything. That's the another problem that we sometimes see, is that people want to be involved in everything, but that's just not possible if you scale in a large company. But at least you should be able to think and understand a little bit business wise. So that's very interesting ways of thinking.
Yeah, it's always
So that's
interesting when you are working with a public company, for example. One interesting test is you listen to the investor's call. So usually public company report their earnings every quarter, and there's a call in which the CEO and the CFO present the results.
Mhm.
And how much do you understand about what your CEO and your CFO are saying, and how much do you understand about the investor or the analyst questions? And it's really interesting because until you already understand what they are talking about, you probably should ask questions to people you know, because it means there's something that is driving your company. And I'm not saying you should be driven only by numbers, but understanding the business in which your company is usually interesting. And that will help you understand that sometimes we are doing great. And people seem to be really criticizing what we are doing. So what is going on there? Do you want to understand that or not? And there's probably people in your company who knows about that. And if it's not your manager, you can ask another person and another person until you know.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you learn a lot by just looking at these things. Because if you see how Amazon, for example, how Jeff Bezos was talking right in the beginning to investors, he was really saying, "Oh, I don't care about some of these small level things, but I'm thinking 10 years ahead, and this is why I'm doing this and that kind of investment." And if you're in that company and you understand that basically his worry is not today, but is 10 years further, I. Um, I talked with people with Spotify, but it said when we were hired, and now I'm talking about something that was said to me like I think about 8 to 10 years ago, and that someone's saying when I was hired, even 5 years. So this is talking now 10, 15 years back at least, and people were saying when they were hired, their competitors were seen as Apple and Google, where these were not working on these kind of project at that time. But the managers at Spotify, they realized, oh, but Apple will work on these kind of things in the future. So we should see them as our competitors. And we should be ready for that. And we know that they have lots more money than we always will have. So we have to work in a smarter way, that we can work in different kind of things. And it's and yeah, so and of course now these days Apple has a similar kind of product. So that is very clear. That they were right. They both work on it in a different way. They work in different direction, but that's fine. But they are competitors that one way or another. So that's and you need to understand that what your boss is worried about, what kind of competitors, because it will, and then brings us back to our goals and our impact mapping. Then will help you again to understand. Because one of these actors is your CEO, and one of the other actors is the investors. They care about what do they want for your product.
Your customers care about that. I've heard one of our customers saying, "Oh, do I really want to externalize my business to that company? I will not name it. That is doing a 60% margin. I'm not so sure." And I was thinking, oh, that's an interesting way to think about that. Is looking at how that company is doing business and how much margin they are doing and how they behave. And that's interesting. I didn't thought of that. I was thinking in terms of features and in terms of services, but is looking at just a step further. And it's an
Yeah,
interesting thing.
because that will tell you how they will collaborate in the future with you, and if they want to give you a lot of margin, but if they have the habit of entering clients and then adding a lot more margin at the end when people are hooked into that company, I don't want to be a customer, of course. So that's really interesting to know that kind of things.
Yep.
So thank you for sharing that. That brings indeed a lot of different ways of thinking about stuff. I want to move to that last question. Is that who do you think I should ask next? And I think you kind of gave it away already a little bit.
Yes, that guy. So it's Goiko Ajik. And so, of course, he's the author of Impact Mapping. And I'm sure he will.
I'm going to show. This is a bigger picture of.
Yeah, this is the man. I'm sure you will have a lovely conversation with him, and people will learn a ton with him. He's a fantastic person. So please have a conversation with Goiko.
Yes, I really look forward. He has written multiple interesting books.
Yeah.
He also has written Humans and Computers, which is just it's both a comic and a horrible and an interesting book, because it's talking about how computers and humans don't always understand each other, or how the computer software is written in a way that it is not always useful for people. And you can look at it as in a comic kind of way, but it's very serious on how different kind of people have problems with it. So that alone is should be a book that everybody who has anything to do with IT should have read. But the impact mapping is a way to solve problems like that, and really like thinking about actors, how could they be impacted in multiple ways. So it's and he's done a lot of other books and a lot of other things as well. And like you say, he's also just a nice guy. It's interesting always to have an interesting conversation with him. So thank you, Alexis, for your time. If people want to contact you, what could be a good way to find you?
So my email is on my website. So it's my first name at myname.com. So Alexis.
And so that's your website, if I'm correctly, the English version?
Exactly. Or LinkedIn is another way, because emails have the tendency
LinkedIn,
to
I added that, and that should be the correct one for LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Exactly. So yeah.
That's a good
happy
way.
Happy to discuss with the people about all what we said or other things.
Yeah, I think you're one of these people who are always interesting to have conversations and around different kind of topics as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you for your time. Yeah, I think this is it's interesting. And I would say happy holidays. We're recording just a few days before for New Year's. Of course, by the time this will be released, it will be long 2023. But anyway, for us recording, we're still before the holidays.
Happy holidays and happy New Year then for everybody.
Exactly. So,
bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.